The city was plunged into an abrupt, unsettling quiet. One moment, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint drone of the AC, the distant murmur of traffic, all the white noise of urban living, had been a constant, almost unnoticed companion. The next, a profound, almost suffocating silence descended, broken only by the sudden, sharp ping of my laptop's battery dying. I'd been halfway through an email to my boss, trying to sound enthusiastic about a new project I secretly dreaded, when the screen went black. A beat of confusion, then recognition. A power outage. Not unusual in the summer, especially with the old grid we had in this part of town, but always a jarring experience. I pushed back from my desk, the squeak of my office chair echoing loudly in the sudden void. My apartment, usually bright and airy thanks to the large windows, was now rapidly surrendering to the encroaching dusk. Outside, the last vestiges of daylight were fading, painted in bruised purples and grays across the sky. "Jose?" I called out, my voice sounding strangely loud, almost foreign, in the stillness. No answer. I knew he was home, though. I'd heard him earlier, clattering around in the kitchen, probably concocting one of his elaborate, multi-ingredient smoothies that always left a sticky residue on the counter. He worked freelance, designing websites, which meant his hours were as unpredictable as his culinary experiments. I fumbled for my phone, its screen a welcome beacon in the gloom. The time read 7:37 p.m. Too early to properly call it night, but dark enough now that the lack of artificial light was disorienting. I navigated by memory, moving towards the kitchen. The faint outline of the counters, the gleam of the stainless steel fridge, everything seemed to possess a new, unfamiliar sharpness in the absence of light. That's when I heard it. A distinct rustle from the living room, followed by a low, almost mischievous chuckle. A shiver, not of fear, but of something else. Something akin to anticipation, traced its way down my spine. Jose had a way of always being exactly where you didn't expect him, and always with an air of playful theatricality. "Jose?" I repeated, this time with a hint of a smile playing on my lips, despite the slight anxiety churning in my stomach. The power outage always brought a certain strange intimacy to our shared space, forcing us out of our individual routines and into a shared experience of vulnerability. Tonight, it felt different. He had been unusually quiet all day, holed up in his room, which was unlike him. Our dynamic was usually one of constant, easy banter, and his silence had left a small, hollow space in the apartment. I rounded the corner from the kitchen, my eyes still adjusting, trying to pierce the thickening shadows in the living room. The large bay window, usually a source of abundant light, now merely framed the inky blue of the sky and the silhouettes of distant buildings. It was then, standing right in the middle of the room, backlit by the last sliver of twilight filtering through the window, that I saw him. Jose. He stood there, perfectly still, a dark, statuesque figure against the fading light. And he was, without a shadow of a doubt, completely, utterly naked. My breath hitched. My mind, usually a well-ordered spreadsheet of tasks and worries, seized up, sputtering to a halt. The world narrowed to this one unbelievable sight. His body, sculpted and lean, was etched in stark relief against the window pane. I noticed the broadness of his shoulders, the defined line of his abs, the powerful curve of his thighs. It wasn't a body I hadn't seen before. We were roommates, after all. There'd been shared changing rooms at the gym, the casual sight of him fresh out of the shower, wrapped in a towel. But this was different. This was deliberate, exposed. And then he grinned. A flash of white teeth in the dimness, a glint in his dark eyes that I could somehow feel rather than see. It was a knowing, mischievous grin, the kind that made my stomach flip and my heart pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Took you long enough, Alex," he said, his voice a low rumble, devoid of any embarrassment or self-consciousness. It was just Jose, unapologetic, unfiltered. My tongue felt thick, glued to the roof of my mouth. I wanted to say something, anything to break the spell, to inject some normalcy into this surreal tableau, but my brain was still catching up, processing the sheer audacity, the unexpectedness of it all. What what are you doing? I finally managed, the words a hoarse whisper. My voice sounded weak even to my own ears. He chuckled again, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the suddenly charged air between us. Enjoying the darkness, obviously. Why hide what the night provides cover for? He spread his arms wide, a gesture of absolute freedom and abandon. His movements were fluid, graceful, almost animalistic. My eyes, despite my best efforts to look anywhere else, kept returning to him, tracing the contours of his body in the dim light. A blush, hot and undeniable, crept up my neck and across my face. It wasn't just the unexpected nudity, it was the way he carried it. The casual confidence that was both disarming and intensely alluring. This wasn't a prank, not exactly. It was an invitation, a statement. We had lived together for almost 2 years now, ever since my old roommate moved out for a job in another city, and Jose, a friend of a mutual friend, needed a place. Our relationship had always been easy, comfortable, built on shared laughter, late-night talks about everything and nothing, and a mutual respect for each other's space and quirks. I was the more introverted one, meticulously organized, prone to overthinking. Jose was the whirlwind, impulsive, gregarious, perpetually radiating an infectious energy that often pulled me out of my own head. And, if I was being brutally honest with myself, I'd been secretly, hopelessly, painfully in love with him for at least half of that time. It was a silent, carefully guarded secret, locked away in a part of my heart I rarely dared to explore. He was straight, or so I'd always assumed, based on casual conversations about women and my own fear of misinterpreting anything. He was just friendly, I'd told myself 1,000 times, just naturally open and warm. My feelings were a dangerous fantasy, a ticking time bomb I never wanted to detonate. Until now. This moment, this raw, unfiltered Jose, challenged every carefully constructed wall I'd built around my emotions. Jose, put some clothes on, I tried again, my voice a little stronger this time, though it still wavered slightly. I crossed my arms over my chest, a subconscious gesture of self-protection. He took a step towards me, his grin widening, a glint of challenge in his eyes. Why? Is the darkness not enough to shield your delicate sensibilities? He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could feel the subtle shift in air, the faint scent of his skin, a mix of something fresh and inherently Jose. The smell was intoxicating, making my head spin. The proximity, combined with his complete lack of clothing, was overwhelming. My heart hammered. I felt a confusing mix of embarrassment, excitement, and a strange, almost primal fear. Fear of what this moment meant, fear of what it might expose in me, fear of breaking the carefully maintained equilibrium of our friendship. It's just not normal, Jose, I stammered, my cheeks burning. I wished I had a flashlight, anything to break the intense focus of this intimate, unlit space. He laughed, a rich, full sound that seemed to fill the room, pushing back against the oppressive silence of the power outage. Normal? Alex, darling, when have we ever been normal? He gestured around the apartment, a theatrical sweep of his arm. Our lives, our routines, our conversations, they're all beautifully chaotic. Why should a little darkness change that? He had a point. Our apartment was a testament to our contrasting personalities. My side was neat, minimalist, organized. His was a vibrant, organized chaos of art supplies, books, half-finished projects, and an impressive collection of houseplants that he talked to every morning. We were an unlikely pair, perhaps, but it worked. Or it had worked. Now, standing before me, unashamedly bare, he was dismantling the fragile piece I'd constructed around my feelings. I found myself staring at his face, trying to discern the meaning behind his playful gaze. Was this just Jose being Jose, pushing boundaries for the sheer amusement of it? Or was there something more, a hint of something deeper, in the way his eyes seemed to bore into mine? You're going to catch a cold, I blurted out, a pathetic attempt to deflect the intensity of the moment with something mundane. Jose threw his head back and laughed again, a joyous, uninhibited sound. A cold? In this summer heat? Alex, you worry too much. He took another step, closer still. Now I could make out the texture of his skin, the slight sheen of sweat. My breath caught in my throat. I'm just enjoying the freedom, he continued, his voice softer now, a subtle shift that made my stomach clench. There's something about the dark, isn't there? It strips away the pretense, makes everything feel raw, real. He was right. The darkness did strip away pretense. It stripped away my own carefully constructed defenses, leaving me exposed to the full force of my feelings. Every suppressed longing, every secret glance, every imagined touch, it all surged to the surface, overwhelming my senses. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, an almost palpable presence in the cool, silent room. What do you mean, real? I managed, my voice barely a whisper. I couldn't tear my gaze away from his eyes, which seemed to glow with a hidden fire in the dimness. Jose's grin softened into a thoughtful expression. He tilted his head slightly, his dark hair falling over his forehead. You know, he began, his voice taking on a thoughtful, almost philosophical tone, a side of him I rarely saw in such an uninhibited context. We spend so much of our lives hiding, from judgment, from expectations, from ourselves. The dark gives us permission to shed all that, to just be. He paused, his gaze unwavering. Don't you feel it? I did. I felt it intensely. The sudden power outage hadn't just plunged the apartment into darkness. It had plunged me into a stark, uncomfortable confrontation with my own desires. The desire to reach out, to touch him, to know what it felt like to have him this close, this vulnerable, this present. My mind raced, grappling with the implications of his words. Was he talking about general human experience, or was there an unspoken message directed at me? My heart clamored for the latter, even as my rational mind screamed at me to remain guarded. I don't know, Jose, I admitted, my voice strained. I felt a tremor run through my hand, and I quickly shoved them into my pockets, hoping to hide my nervousness. He took another step, closing the distance between us until he was barely an arm's length away. I could feel the warmth of his skin, the subtle shift in the air that accompanied his presence. It was overwhelming, intoxicating. My heart hammered so violently I thought he must surely hear it. You're flushed, Alex, he observed, his voice soft, almost tender. His gaze was impossibly deep, probing. Even in the dark, I can tell. What are you thinking? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities. What was I thinking? I was thinking about the curve of his lips, the dark expanse of his chest, the way his body seemed to glow in the residual light. I was thinking about how much I wanted to reach out and touch him, to bridge the small yet immense gap between us. I was thinking about how terrified I was to do exactly that. I'm just surprised, Jose, I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My voice was thin, reedy. It was a terrible lie, and I knew he could see right through it. He always could. He let out a low hum, a sound of contemplation. Surprised, huh? He took a deliberate step closer, and my breath caught. He was so near now that I could feel the heat radiating from him, the faint, earthy scent of his skin filling my nostrils. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, a palpable current that flowed between us. Or maybe, he continued, his voice dropping to a seductive murmur that sent shivers through my entire body, you're just reacting to the freedom. His hand, warm and strong, reached out, not to touch me, but to brush past my shoulder, gesturing vaguely towards the window. The freedom of the night, the freedom to simply be. His words, his proximity, his unapologetic nakedness. It was all a heady cocktail that left me disoriented and breathless. Every nerve ending in my body was alive, humming with an electric energy. I wanted to move, to back away, to create some space between us, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. It was as if a magnetic force held me captive, drawn irrevocably towards him. "Jose, please," I whispered, the plea escaping my lips before I could stop it. It was a plea for him to stop, to put clothes on, to break the spell, but it was also, terrifyingly, a plea for him to continue, to push further, to explore this dangerous, thrilling territory. He studied my face, his dark eyes seeming to pierce through the gloom and into my very soul. The playful grin had faded, replaced by an expression of intense curiosity, tinged with something deeper, something I couldn't quite decipher. His hand slowly, deliberately came to rest on my arm, his fingers warm against my skin, sending a jolt through me that felt like an electric shock. My entire body stiffened. This was it. The boundary was not just blurred, it was dissolving. Our carefully maintained platonic relationship, built on polite distance and unspoken rules, was crumbling around us like dust, and I was both terrified and exhilarated by its collapse. "Alex," he murmured, his thumb gently stroking the skin of my forearm, a feather-light touch that nonetheless felt immensely powerful. "You're shaking." He wasn't wrong. A tremor was indeed running through me, a mix of fear and an almost unbearable longing. I wanted to lean into his touch, to let my hand find his, to feel the warmth of his skin against mine. But the years of suppressed feelings, the deeply ingrained fear of rejection, held me captive. It's cold," I stammered, another pathetic lie, even as sweat beaded on my forehead. My mind was screaming at me to find an escape route, but my body refused to obey. Jose's eyes twinkled in the dark. "Is it now?" His voice was laced with a knowing amusement that both irritated and captivated me. He knew I was lying. He always knew. He had an uncanny ability to read me, to see through my carefully constructed facade. It was one of the things I loved and feared most about him. He took a slow, deliberate breath, his chest rising and falling in front of me. The air grew thicker, heavier, charged with unspoken words and unacknowledged desires. The power outage had taken away the light, but it had illuminated something far more profound between us. "What if," Jose began, his voice barely above a whisper, his gaze fixed on mine, "what if we just embraced the dark, Alex? What if we let go of all the rules, just for a little while?" The question hung in the air, a potent challenge, a dangerous invitation. It was the question I had secretly longed for and simultaneously dreaded for months. To embrace the dark with Jose, what did that even mean? My imagination, already running wild, conjured 1,000 different scenarios, each more thrilling and terrifying than the last. My eyes involuntarily dropped from his face, scanning his bare chest, the slight rise and fall with each breath. The vulnerability, the sheer raw honesty of him standing there, was overwhelming. It wasn't just a physical nakedness, it was an emotional one too, reflected in the intensity of his gaze, in the deliberate softness of his voice. "Jose," I said again, my voice barely audible. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, trying to regain some semblance of control to steady my racing heart. When I opened them, his face was even closer, his eyes dark pools, reflecting the last slivers of twilight. "I've wanted to do this for a long time, Alex," he confessed, his voice dropping to a level of intimacy that sent shivers of pure euphoria down my spine. The words were a revelation, a shattering of my carefully constructed fantasy that he was straight, that my feelings were one-sided. My mind reeled. Had I misread him all this time? Or had he been hiding his feelings as meticulously as I had hidden mine? The thought sent a dizzying wave of hope and fear through me. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice thin, almost breathy. I needed him to spell it out, to remove all ambiguity. even though every fiber of my being already understood. His gaze softened further, losing its playful edge, becoming something warm and vulnerable. He reached out with his other hand, gently cupping my cheek. His palm was warm, rough with the calluses from his work, but his touch was incredibly tender. My skin tingled under his touch, a wave of heat spreading through my face and neck. "I'm saying," he whispered, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, sending a delicious shiver down my spine, "that I'm tired of pretending, tired of the rules, tired of the distance." His eyes searched mine, pleading, vulnerable. "I'm saying I'm attracted to you, Alex. More than just a roommate, more than just a friend." The confession hung in the air, a delicate, fragile thing, yet it resonated with the force of a thunderclap. My heart leaped, a wild bird set free. All the years of unspoken longing, of careful concealment, dissolved in an instant. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a surge of pure, unadulterated joy. You are?" I asked, the words feeling utterly inadequate to express the tumultuous emotions swirling within me. My voice was choked with emotion. He nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering, full of an earnestness that melted away any lingering doubt. "More than you know." He paused, his eyes dropping to my lips, and then back up to meet my gaze. "And I think you feel something similar, don't you?" My breath caught. There was no point in denying it now, no possibility of retreating behind my usual defenses. The darkness, his nakedness, his raw honesty, it had all conspired to strip me bare as well, exposing the truth of my heart. A nervous, almost giddy laugh bubbled up from my chest. "Jose, I've been half in love with you since you moved in." The words spilled out raw and unfiltered, a confession as naked as he was. A weight, one I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying, lifted from my shoulders, leaving me feeling strangely light, buoyant. A slow ender smile spread across his face, one that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. The mischief was gone, replaced by a quiet, profound relief. "I knew it," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I had a feeling. I was too scared to be wrong." His thumb continued to caress my cheek, a gentle, reassuring gesture. The power outage, the darkness, the silence. It all amplified the intimacy of the moment, making every touch, every word, feel incredibly potent. This wasn't just a casual conversation. It was a watershed moment, a turning point in our lives, brought about by a sudden absence of light. "Scared of what?" I asked, my voice still trembling, but now with a different kind of tremor. "Anticipation. Hope." "Scared of ruining everything," he admitted, his eyes shadowed with a vulnerability that mirrored my own. "Scared of making things awkward. Scared of losing you as a friend, even if it meant never having you as anything more." He paused, his gaze intensifying. But then the power went out, and I thought, what's the worst that can happen? The world's already gone dark. Might as well shine a light on what's real, right? He squeezed my arm gently, his touch a grounding force amidst the swirling emotions. The courage it must have taken him to stand naked before me, to confess his feelings, to put himself out there so completely, struck me with a fresh wave of awe and affection. It was so quintessentially Jose, impulsive and utterly authentic. "You are absolutely insane, you know that?" I said, a soft laugh escaping my lips, a mix of relief and pure adoration. His smile widened, a joyful, uninhibited grin. "Only for you, Alex. Only for you." And then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned in. My heart leaped into my throat, hammering against my ribs. I closed my eyes, anticipating, longing. His lips, soft and warm, met mine. It wasn't a forceful kiss or a passionate one, not yet. It was tentative, exploratory, a question and an answer all at once, a silent acknowledgement of all the unspoken feelings, all the hidden desires that had simmered beneath the surface of our friendship for so long. The world tilted. The darkness around us seemed to deepen, to become a soft, enveloping blanket that shielded us from everything else. There was only Jose, his lips on mine, the warmth of his hand on my cheek, the subtle scent of his skin, and the overwhelming, intoxicating rush of finally connecting with him in a way I had only dreamed of. I responded instinctively, my own lips parting, leaning into his touch, my hands instinctively reaching up to find his bare shoulders, my fingers gripping the warm, smooth skin. His muscles tensed slightly under my touch, a silent affirmation of his presence, his desire. The kiss deepened, slowly, tentatively at first, then with a growing intensity, fueled by months, years of pent-up emotion. It was clumsy, imperfect, but utterly real, utterly beautiful. A spark ignited, not just between our lips, but deep within my chest, spreading a warmth that chased away the last vestiges of fear and doubt. When we finally broke apart, it was only for air, our foreheads resting against each other, our breaths mingling in the silent, dark room. The faint glow of my phone screen, still clutched in my hand, was the only light, but it was enough to see the shimmering of emotion in his dark eyes, mirrored in my own. "Wow," I breathed, the single word inadequate to capture the seismic shift that had just occurred. Jose chuckled, a low, husky sound. "Yeah, wow." He pulled back slightly, his hands still cupping my face, his thumbs gently caressing my cheeks. His grin was back, but this time it was softer, more tender, laced with a triumphant affection that made my heart ache in the best possible way. "I told you the darkness makes everything real." He was right. The power outage had not just taken away the light, it had unveiled a truth I had been too afraid to acknowledge, and now, standing in the dark, with Jose's hands on my face, and his bare body so close to mine, I felt more alive, more exposed, and more utterly, blissfully hopeful than I ever had before. The world outside might be dark and silent, but in our small apartment, a new kind of light had just flickered to life. A light of possibility, of connection, of a love finally, bravely acknowledged. And I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within my soul, that this was just the beginning. The first thing I registered was the weight of an arm draped across my chest, anchoring me to the mattress. The second was the soft, rhythmic sound of breathing close to my ear. My eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the dim light filtering through the blinds, painting stripes of muted gray across the unfamiliar ceiling. It took a bewildered moment for the haze of sleep to dissipate, for the fragmented memories of the night before to coalesce into something coherent. Then the full rush of it hit me, the electricity, or rather, the lack of it, the darkness, the unexpected visitor, the daring grin, the disrobing, the laughter, the heat, the intimacy. A flush spread through me, warming my skin from the inside out, a mix of embarrassment and an unfamiliar, thrilling sense of peace. I slowly turned my head. Jose lay beside me, his dark hair a little rumpled against the white pillowcase, his features softened by sleep. The curve of his jaw, the faint stubble, the gentle rise and fall of his chest. He looked so vulnerable, so utterly human, a stark contrast to the audacious figure who had appeared in my doorway just hours earlier. My heart gave a little flutter, a nervous bird trapped in my ribs. We had spent the night talking, mostly, sharing stories in the flickering candlelight, revealing glimpses of our lives, our dreams, our disappointments. The lack of power had stripped away the usual distractions, forcing us into a raw, unfiltered connection. We had laughed, really laughed, until our sides ached. And then, As the candles burned low, the conversation had quieted, replaced by a different kind of communication, a silent understanding that pulled us closer. The initial playful dare had morphed into something deeper, something profoundly tender. It wasn't just physical, though the electricity between us had been undeniable. It was a meeting of spirits, a recognizing of something kindred. We had fallen asleep tangled together, limbs intertwined, long after the last candle sputtered out. Now, in the quiet aftermath, the enormity of what had happened settled upon me. I, Elias, usually so guarded, so meticulous, so predictable, had let a complete stranger, a very charming, very naked stranger, into my home and my bed. And not just that, I had genuinely liked it. More than liked it, I felt alive. A soft sigh escaped Jose's lips, and his arm tightened almost imperceptibly around me. He was stirring. I held my breath, unsure how to navigate this morning-after landscape. Would it be awkward? Regretful? Or would the magic of the night before linger? His eyelids fluttered, then opened, revealing dark, sleepy eyes that crinkled at the corners as he became aware of his surroundings. His gaze met mine, and for a long moment, we just looked at each other. There was no immediate grin, no playful bravado, just a soft, almost shy smile that slowly bloomed on his face. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my own voice a little hoarse. The word felt intimate, a shared secret. He stretched, his muscles flexing beneath the sheet, and the movement caused a delicious shiver to run through me. His arm slipped from my chest, but then his hand found mine, his fingers lacing naturally through mine. His thumb began to gently trace patterns on the back of my hand. The small gesture was incredibly comforting. "The power still out?" he asked, his eyes scanning the room. The digital clock on my bedside table was indeed blank. "Looks like it," I confirmed. "No coffee, then?" I tried to sound casual, but the truth was I was craving it, and also dreading the return to normalcy. The power coming back on felt like an alarm clock, signaling the end of our secluded bubble. Jose chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the mattress. "No problem. I'm good with a cold shower, or a hot one, if your water heater runs on gas." "It does," I admitted, a small smile playing on my lips. "But maybe we should check the fridge first, see what survived the night." He pushed himself up on one elbow, his eyes sparkling now. "Ah, the practicalities of a blackout morning. My kind of man." He winked, and a familiar spark of mischief returned to his eyes. The tension I hadn't realized I was holding dissipated. This was still Jose. We slowly untangled ourselves from the sheets, the cool morning air a gentle shock against our skin. There was a natural grace to Jose's movements as he rose, unself-conscious in his nudity. I, on the other hand, felt a pang of self-consciousness, though I tried to hide it. I've always been a bit reserved about my body, a bit critical, but Jose seemed to possess an easy confidence that was infectious. He picked up his scattered clothes from the floor, neatly folding them before placing them on a chair. It was a surprisingly neat gesture for someone who had burst into my life with such joyful chaos. I watched him, fascinated, as he moved around my bedroom, now less like a stranger and more like a guest who had overstayed his welcome, yet was somehow entirely welcome. "I should probably find something to wear," I muttered, heading for my dresser. "No rush," Jose said, his voice warm. "Unless you have an early meeting with the mayor?" I laughed. No mayor, just an early start on my architectural plans." I gestured vaguely towards my home office, which was just around the corner. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me pull on a pair of soft cotton shorts and a t-shirt. "Architect, huh? That explains the impeccable lines of your apartment. Very clean, very minimalist. I like it." His observation made me feel a strange mixture of pride and exposure. My apartment was a reflection of me, orderly, precise, carefully constructed. And here he was, a force of nature, disrupting its equilibrium. We made our way to the kitchen, the silence punctuated by the creak of floorboards and the distant sounds of the city slowly waking up. A dog barking, a car rumbling by. The fridge hummed to life as soon as I opened it, a glorious, blessed sound. The power was back. "Well, look at that," Jose said, leaning over my shoulder to peer inside. "Miracle of modern engineering, or just very diligent utility workers." The sudden return of light, the whirring of the fridge, the hum of the apartment building's systems, it all felt abrupt, pulling us out of our secluded haven. The magic of the candlelight seemed to recede, replaced by the starker reality of a new day. "Coffee it is, then," I said, reaching for the French press. My hands felt a little shaky as I measured out the grounds. I wondered if he noticed. "Anything I can do?" Jose asked, pulling out a stool at the island. "You could tell me about yourself," I suggested, glancing at him over my shoulder. Beyond the naked and grinning entrance, of course. He chuckled. "Fair enough. What do you want to know?" "Everything." We settled into a rhythm. I made coffee. He watched, occasionally interjecting with a story or a question. He told me he was a freelance photographer, mostly commercial work, but his passion was street photography, capturing the raw, unscripted moments of urban life. He loved to travel, hated routine, and had a mischievous streak a mile wide. He talked about growing up in a bustling, close-knit family, the youngest of 3 boys, which explained his easy confidence and playful nature. "And you, Elias?" he prompted, stirring a spoonful of sugar into his mug. "Tell me about the architect, the man who designs order." I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached my eyes. "Well, I grew up here, in the city. Always loved drawing, building things. Architecture just felt like a natural fit. I liked the challenge of taking an abstract idea and making it real, tangible, giving people spaces to live, to work, to create." "Sounds very satisfying," he said, nodding. "Do you ever just break the rules? Design something completely wild and impractical, just for the hell of it?" I considered this. Sometimes. In my head, yes. On paper, for a client? Not often. I'm a bit of a stickler for functionality. "See, that's where we differ," Jose said, his eyes sparkling again. "I live for the impractical, the unexpected, the moments that defy logic." He took a slow sip of his coffee, his gaze thoughtful. "Like last night." My breath hitched. The implication hung in the air, electric and fragile. "Last night was certainly unexpected," I managed, my voice a little tight. "But good, right?" he pressed, his eyes searching mine. His vulnerability, after all his bravado, was disarming. "More than good," I admitted, looking away, then back. "It was extraordinary." A slow, pleased smile spread across his face, and he reached across the island to take my hand again. This time, he simply held it, his fingers warm and firm around mine. The world outside, with its returned power and bustling sounds, seemed to fade into the background. We talked for what felt like hours, sitting at my kitchen island, fueled by coffee and the lingering intimacy of the night. We moved from light-hearted anecdotes to deeper reflections, sharing bits of our past relationships, our fears, our hopes for the future. I found myself telling him things I hadn't shared with anyone in years, stories about past heartbreaks, about my occasional loneliness despite my outwardly fulfilling life. Jose listened with an attentiveness that was rare, his dark eyes never leaving mine, making me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. He, in turn, spoke of his own experiences. He'd been in a long-term relationship that ended amicably, but left him wary of commitment. "It's not that I don't want it," he explained, stirring his coffee absently. "It's just, when you give so much of yourself and it doesn't work out, you realize how much there is to lose. And I've always been someone who dives in head first, without looking. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes it leaves you a bit bruised." I nodded, understanding his sentiment perfectly. My own history was less about diving in head first and more about careful toe-dipping, which had often left me feeling unfulfilled and disconnected. The fear of getting hurt had kept me at arm's length from true intimacy, creating a comfortable, safe distance that now, after Jose, felt stifling. "So what now, Elias?" Jose asked, his voice softer, more serious than before. His fingers tightened around my hand. "The power's back on. The sun's up. Does the magic just disappear?" I looked into his eyes, seeing a flicker of uncertainty there, a slight vulnerability that mirrored my own. This was the moment of truth. This was where the easy camaraderie of the night, the playful seduction, met the cold light of day. This was where the what ifs became what nows. "No," I said firmly, the word surprising me with its conviction. "No, I don't think it does." I squeezed his hand back. "I don't want it to." A relieved smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes. "Good," he breathed, a genuine lightness returning to his voice, "because I definitely don't want it to either." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the city sounds filtering in, no longer an intrusion, but a backdrop to our quiet understanding. The coffee was getting cold, but neither of us moved. It felt like we were charting new territory, navigating the delicate space between an extraordinary one-night encounter and the possibility of something more. Eventually, Jose glanced at his watch. "As much as I'd love to make this a permanent fixture," he said with a wry grin, "I do have a shoot this afternoon, but I also, apparently, left my car parked 3 blocks away in the dark last night and forgot about it." I laughed, a warm, genuine laugh. "I imagine you had other things on your mind." "You could say that," he agreed, his eyes twinkling. He stood up, pulling me gently to my feet with him. The height difference between us was noticeable, but comfortable. He was taller, broader, and his warmth radiated against me. He didn't immediately pull away. Instead, he just stood there, looking down at me, his thumb brushing my jawline. The proximity was intoxicating, his scent a mix of sleep, my soap, and something uniquely him. It was a potent combination that made my stomach flutter. "Thank you, Elias," he said, his voice dropping to a low murmur, "for everything." His gaze was intense, conveying far more than his words. "Thank you, Jose," I replied, finding myself leaning into his touch without conscious thought. "For the adventure." He smiled, then leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't a hungry, passionate kiss like some from the night before, but a soft, tender press of lips, full of promise and warmth. It lasted just long enough to send a shiver through me before he pulled back slightly. "I really should go," he said, though his eyes lingered on mine, "but only if you promise to let me take you out tonight. Dinner, drinks, more talking. No power outages this time, though I am partial to candlelight." My heart soared. "I'd like that very much," I said, a wide smile spreading across my face. "Good." He gave my hand a final squeeze. "I'll text you the details. Don't go designing any skyscrapers without me." He was gone a few minutes later, leaving behind a lingering scent in my apartment, a warmth in my bed, and a profound shift in my carefully constructed world. I stood by the door, watching him walk down the hallway, a casual bounce in his step, until he disappeared from view. The silence that followed his departure was immense. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm, now felt emptier. The neatness, the order, the familiar silence, they all seemed to highlight the recent disruption. But it wasn't an unwelcome emptiness. It was an emptiness that held the echo of laughter, the ghost of a touch, the promise of a return. I spent the rest of the morning in a daze. My usual routine of reviewing architectural plans, sketching designs, and answering emails felt distant, almost irrelevant. My mind kept replaying scenes from the night before, from the moment I opened my door to his grinning, naked form, to our quiet conversation over cold coffee. Who was this man? And why had he so effortlessly, so completely turned my world upside down? I was a creature of habit, a lover of logic and structure. Jose was pure spontaneity, a vibrant splash of color in my monochromatic existence. Yet Instead of feeling overwhelmed or threatened by the disruption, I felt invigorated, alive. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Hey Elias, it's Jose. Just got to my car. It survived. Dinner tonight? My treat. I know a great little place downtown. Pick you up at 7. Give me a call if that works, or if you prefer a different time. Jay." A foolish grin spread across my face. He'd remembered my name, and he wanted to see me again. A genuine date. Not a power outage-induced anomaly, but an actual, deliberate date. It felt momentous. I typed out a quick reply. 7 sounds perfect. Looking forward to it. I hit send, my thumb hovering over the screen, a sense of nervous excitement bubbling inside me. This was new territory, a landscape I hadn't dared to explore in years. The last time I had felt this kind of nervous anticipation was probably in college. My past relationships had all started differently, cautiously, often through mutual friends or shared interests, slowly building like a well-structured design. This was a whirlwind, an earthquake, an act of sheer, beautiful chaos. I tried to focus on my work, but my concentration was shot. My mind kept drifting back to Jose's easy laugh, the warmth of his hand, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. I found myself sketching not buildings but abstract shapes, swirling lines, and energetic bursts of color. Things completely out of character for my usual precise drawings. It felt liberating. Later that afternoon, a sudden wave of panic washed over me. What was I doing? I barely knew this man. What if this was all just a fleeting spark, a novelty born of an unusual circumstance? What if he was just looking for a good time, and I was reading too much into it? My cautious, pragmatic side started to rear its head, whispering doubts. I walked over to my large window overlooking the bustling city. Below, life continued, predictable and busy. My apartment had always been my sanctuary, a place where I felt safe, in control. Jose had breached that sanctuary, not with force, but with an open heart and an irresistible smile. And I had let him, willingly, eagerly. I thought about my last serious relationship, which had ended almost 2 years ago. It was a comfortable, amicable separation, born more out of a quiet drifting apart than any major conflict. We were good friends, but there was never that spark, that profound connection I secretly longed for. I had become complacent, content with the familiar, afraid to venture into the unknown. Was Jose the unknown? He certainly felt like it. He felt like a gust of fresh air, a sudden storm, a jolt of energy. He challenged my carefully constructed world, not by criticizing it, but by simply existing in contrast to it. He made me want to step outside my comfort zone, to embrace the unpredictable. I picked up my phone again, my fingers hovering over his number. Should I call him, express my doubts, or just trust the feeling, the undeniably potent connection we had shared? I took a deep breath. No, I wouldn't overthink it. For once, I would allow myself to just feel. I would lean into the excitement, the uncertainty, the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of it all. I decided to take an early shower, a long hot one, letting the water wash away the lingering anxieties. I needed to clear my head, to prepare for the evening. What should I wear? Something casual but stylish. I rummaged through my closet, pulling out different options, a rare moment of indecision for me. Usually my clothes were as predictable as my routine, but tonight I wanted to present a different version of myself, a version that felt more aligned with the person Jose had seen, the person he had brought out in me. As I dressed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. There was a lightness in my eyes, a subtle smile playing on my lips that hadn't been there yesterday. My apartment, once just a perfectly designed space, now held a new resonance, a warmth, a memory of laughter and shared vulnerabilities. It felt like the stage for a new beginning. The anticipation grew with each passing hour. I found myself pacing, checking my phone, glancing at the clock. It was ridiculous, a grown man acting like a teenager, but I couldn't help it. The feeling was exhilarating, a potent mix of nerves and eagerness. At 6:50 p.m., my doorbell rang. He was early. A small, endearing detail. My heart pounded as I walked to the door, taking a deep breath to steady myself. This was it. The real first date. No power outage to blame for our actions, no shared vulnerability forged in the darkness. Just two men, stepping out into the light, ready to see where this unexpected connection might lead. I opened the door. Jose stood there, looking even more handsome than I remembered. He was wearing dark jeans, a fitted button-down shirt that highlighted his broad shoulders, and a smile that instantly put me at ease. His hair was slightly damp, still smelling faintly of shampoo. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers, their colors vibrant and a little wild, just like him. "Hey," he said, his eyes sparkling. "Hope you don't mind me being a few minutes early. Couldn't wait." I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Not at all," I managed, my voice a little breathless. "They're beautiful." I took the flowers, inhaling their fresh, earthy scent. "Like you, Elias," he said softly, his gaze holding mine. "Beautiful and a little wild." My carefully constructed composure crumbled, replaced by a warmth that spread through every fiber of my being. He saw me, truly saw me, beyond the orderly facade, beyond the architect who designed perfect lines. He saw the potential for wildness, the hidden desires, the parts of myself I rarely allowed others to glimpse. "Ready for round two?" he asked, a playful glint returning to his eyes. I smiled, a genuine, full-hearted smile that reached every corner of my face. "More than ready, Jose. More than ready." And as I stepped out of my apartment, closing the door behind me, I felt a sense of exhilaration I hadn't known was possible. The power was back, the city lights were bright, and the world felt infinitely more vibrant. The afterglow of the night was still with me, but now it was joined by the dazzling promise of a new dawn. This was just the beginning. I knew it in my bones. Life with Jose had settled into a rhythm that was both exhilarating and profoundly comforting. It had been a little over 2 months since the night the lights went out, a period that felt simultaneously like a whirlwind and an eternity. We'd moved past the initial spark, the breathless excitement of new discovery, and were now firmly in the territory of shared routines, inside jokes, and a comfortable, almost telepathic understanding. My apartment, once a solitary refuge, now vibrated with his presence, his scent, the hum of his deep voice often filling the silence. I found myself marveling at the mundane, watching him make coffee in the morning, his movements fluid and unhurried, a stray curl falling across his forehead that I'd instinctively reach out to brush back. The way he'd absent-mindedly hum a tune while doing dishes, a melody I'd then find myself whistling later in the day. These small moments, unremarkable on their own, wove together into the intricate tapestry of a shared life, and I cherished each thread. Yet, despite this growing intimacy, there were still parts of Jose that felt like uncharted territory. He was an open book in many ways, quick to laugh, generous with his affection, transparent about his feelings in the moment. But his past, his deeper anxieties, his long-term dreams, those were areas he approached with a certain circumspection, a gentle evasion I hadn't pressed too hard on. It wasn't that he actively hid things, more that he seemed to live so fully in the present that dredging up history felt, to him, unnecessary. I, on the other hand, was a creature of reflection, always analyzing the past to understand the present and anticipate the future. This difference in our temperaments was a source of fascination, sometimes a quiet challenge. "Penny for your thoughts?" Jose's voice broke through my reverie one Saturday afternoon. We were sprawled on my sofa. The city sounds a soft backdrop to the quiet of the apartment. My head was resting on his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat, his fingers gently stroking my hair. I sighed, a contented sound. "Just thinking about us. How good this is, Gaun." He chuckled, a rumble in his chest. "Good? Is that all? I thought we were aiming for exceptionally fantastic, life-altering, mind-blowing at least." I swatted his arm playfully. Don't be modest. You know it's all of that. But also real. And sometimes real things have layers. He paused his gentle ministrations, and I felt his gaze on the top of my head. Layers, huh? Sounds like you're trying to peel an onion, mi amor. Maybe, I admitted, my voice a little softer. I feel like I know so much about you now. The way you like your eggs, the ridiculous action movies you secretly love, the fact that you hum when you're nervous. But then there are moments when I feel like I've only scratched the surface. He shifted, pulling me closer so I could see his face. His dark eyes held a warmth that always melted something inside me. But there was also a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. A touch of vulnerability, perhaps. What surface are you looking for, then? Your history, I said, blurting it out before I could censor myself. Your family, your big plans. What keeps you up at night, other than me hogging the duvet? Jose's smile softened, losing some of its usual playful edge. My family, they're back in Colombia. My parents, a younger sister. We talk on video calls. They're good people. Very traditional, very loving. That's about it. And you? Why did you come here? I asked, treading carefully. It felt like a significant question, one he'd always skirted around. He'd told me about his engineering work, about finding opportunities, but never about the why beyond the professional. He looked away for a moment, his gaze drifting towards the window, where the afternoon light filtered in. It's a long story, he said finally, his tone even, but with an underlying current I couldn't quite place. A lot of reasons. Opportunity, yes, but also a need for space. To figure things out on my own terms. Space from what? I pressed, emboldened by his unusual seriousness. He turned back to me, his eyes now direct, holding mine. From expectations. From a path that felt preordained. From a kind of life I wasn't sure was truly mine, even though it looked good on paper. He gave a small, wry smile. Sounds cliché, I know. The young man seeking his fortune, finding himself in the big city. But it's true. I nodded slowly, absorbing this. It resonated with my own quiet desire for self-determination, though my journey had been less geographically dramatic. And have you found it? What you're looking for? He reached out, cupping my cheek gently. I think I'm finding pieces of it. And you're a very big, very wonderful piece. His honesty was disarming. So what's the path that felt preordained? I asked, pushing a little further. He hesitated again, then let out a soft breath. My family is, well, respected. My father runs a successful business, something in manufacturing. My sister is already being groomed to take over some aspects. There's an expectation of legacy, of carrying on the family name, marrying well, having children, a certain kind of stability, a certain kind of future. And I just didn't see myself fitting perfectly into that mold. My heart ached a little for the unspoken pressure he must have felt. Because of you being gay? I asked, keeping my voice low. He met my gaze steadily. That's definitely a part of it, a big part. It's not something my parents are ready to fully accept, even though they suspect. It's easier to be myself here, to explore what that means, to love who I want to love openly. His thumb brushed my lower lip. Like you. A wave of emotion washed over me, a mix of tenderness and a profound understanding of the sacrifices he'd made, the distances he'd traveled, not just physically, but emotionally, to be the person he was, here, with me. The grin he'd worn that first night, so unburdened and free, suddenly felt like a testament to a hard-won freedom. Thank you for telling me, I whispered, leaning into his touch. That means a lot. It's part of the layers, right? He said, a familiar lightness returning to his voice, though his eyes remained serious. You ask? I tell. No secrets. Just timing. This conversation felt like a small dam breaking, allowing a deeper current to flow between us. It wasn't a dramatic confession, but a quiet, tender unveiling that strengthened the fabric of our connection. We spent the rest of the afternoon just talking, not about deep secrets, but about small things that built bridges. His childhood memories of the vibrant streets of Bogota, my adolescent dreams of moving to a big city, the teachers who'd inspired us, the silly mistakes we'd made. Each story was a piece of the puzzle, slotting into place, creating a clearer picture of the man I was falling so deeply in love with. A few weeks later, an unexpected opportunity arose that would test this newfound openness. Jose was offered a project, an international collaboration that would require him to travel to Toronto for a month. It was a huge career step for him, exactly the kind of challenging, high-profile work he excelled at. When he told me, his eyes were shining with excitement, but I also saw a flicker of apprehension. "A month is a long time," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, ignoring the knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "I know," he said, his hand finding mine, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. "But it's a really big deal for my career. It could open so many doors." "Of course, you have to go," I said, forcing a smile. "I wouldn't want you to miss out on something like this. I'll miss you terribly, though." He leaned in and kissed me, a soft, lingering kiss that promised he'd miss me too. "We'll video call every day, and I'll send you ridiculous postcards. You can even come visit if you want, for a weekend." The thought of him being away for a month felt like a huge wrench. We'd spent almost every day together since that power outage. My routine had entirely recalibrated around his presence. Waking up to his messy hair and sleepy smile, late-night talks, spontaneous dinners, even just the shared silence of working in the same room. The idea of going back to the solitary existence I'd known before him suddenly felt bleak. It wasn't just about missing him. It was about the fear of the space his absence would create, and what that space might reveal about us. Would the connection hold across the distance? Would the intensity wane? Jose, always perceptive, seemed to sense my unspoken fears. "Hey," he said, pulling back slightly to look into my eyes. "This isn't forever. It's just a month. Think of it as a test run for how much you really miss me." He grinned, trying to lighten the mood, but his eyes were serious. "We're solid, right? This isn't going to change anything." "Of course not," I said, trying to reassure both of us. "We're solid." Despite my brave face, the apprehension lingered. The packing process was bittersweet. I helped him fold clothes, organize his documents, and even bought him a new travel mug, a small gesture to try and infuse some of my presence into his journey. Each item he packed felt like a tangible piece of him being prepared for departure. The morning he left was the hardest. We stood at the airport gate, surrounded by the clamor of travelers, but feeling like we were in a bubble of our own making. He pulled me into a tight hug, holding me close, his chin resting on my head. "Be good," he murmured into my hair. "Don't go adopting any stray cats while I'm gone." I laughed, a little watery. "No promises. And you, don't go charming the entire city of Toronto." He pulled back, his eyes sparkling. "I make no such promises either, but my heart stays here, with you." He kissed me then, a deep, passionate kiss that made my knees weak and lingered long after he'd turned and walked through the gate, his hand lifting in a final wave. The silence of my apartment that evening was deafening. I found myself pacing, picking up objects he'd touched, his coffee cup still on the counter, a faint scent of his cologne clinging to his side of the bed. It was more than just missing him. It was an unfamiliar ache, a hollow space where his energy used to be. I realized how much I'd come to rely on his presence, not just for comfort and affection, but also as a kind of anchor in my own life. The first few days were tough. My phone felt like an extension of my hand, constantly checking for messages. Our video calls became the highlight of my day, his face appearing on my screen, tired but smiling, recounting his day, asking about mine. We'd talk for hours, sometimes just watching each other, the distance a palpable thing between us, yet also a reminder of the strength of our connection. But then, as the initial novelty of daily video calls began to settle, a different kind of challenge emerged. Jose's project was demanding, and he was working long hours. Our calls became shorter, sometimes skipped entirely if his schedule was too hectic. He was apologetic, always, but I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, see the strain in his eyes. "I'm sorry, mi amor," he'd say, his voice rough with sleep deprivation. "Just got off a 12-hour shift. Need to crash. Can we talk proper tomorrow?" "Of course," I'd say, trying to sound understanding, even as a small seed of unease began to sprout in my chest. I knew he was busy, that this was important for him. But the sudden reduction in communication, the feeling of him being so far away and consumed by something I wasn't a part of, left me feeling strangely adrift. I found myself overthinking things. Was I being clingy? Was I expecting too much? Was this distance revealing an imbalance in our needs for communication and reassurance? I tried to fill the void. I picked up old hobbies, spent more time with friends, threw myself into my own work. But every activity felt a little less vibrant without him. One evening, after a particularly short and disjointed call, I found myself staring at the wall, a deep frown etched on my face. Jose had seemed distracted, talking about a colleague, Isabella, who was also on the project and was proving to be a great asset. He'd mentioned her several times over the past week. Nothing alarming, just professional praise. But in my tired, lonely state, my mind, ever prone to analysis, started weaving narratives. What if this distance was making him realize he preferred a simpler life, one without the complications of a long-distance relationship? What if Isabella was charming and understanding and present? I hated myself for even thinking such things. It was completely unfair to Jose, who had given me no reason to doubt him. His affection, his sincerity, his commitment had always been unwavering. This was my own insecurity, my own vulnerability peeking through the cracks, but knowing that didn't make the gnawing feeling go away. The next day, I found myself drafting a long, emotionally charged email to him, listing all my fears, all my anxieties, demanding reassurance. I typed and deleted, the words feeling accusatory and needy. This wasn't me, this wasn't fair, I remembered his words. No secrets, just timing. And what he'd told me about his family, his longing for space to be himself. He'd opened up to me about something profound. Now it was my turn to trust him and to communicate my feelings honestly, but also with sensitivity. Instead of the email, I decided to wait for our next call, to talk to him directly. When his face appeared on the screen that evening, tired but undeniably relieved to see me, I felt a pang of guilt for my earlier doubts. "Hey, you," he said, his smile stretching across the screen. "Sorry I've been so rubbish with calls lately. This project is really intense, but it's good, really challenging." "I know," I said, taking a deep breath. "I'm happy for you. Really, it sounds amazing." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "But I'm also having a hard time, Jose." His smile faded, replaced by concern. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, physically," I clarified. "Emotionally, it's harder than I thought it would be. All this distance, the shorter calls. I know you're busy, and I understand, but I feel a bit disconnected. And I miss you so much it hurts." The words came out in a rush, a quiet confession of my vulnerability. He listened, his expression softening, his eyes never leaving mine. There was no defensiveness, no impatience, just genuine empathy. When I finished, a silence hung between us for a moment, punctuated only by the faint hum of our respective connections. "I'm so sorry, mi amor," he said, his voice quiet, filled with regret. "I didn't realize I was making you feel that way. I've been so caught up in the work, I haven't been paying enough attention to us." He raked a hand through his already disheveled hair. "You're right. It's not fair to you. I took our connection for granted, thinking it would just survive on its own, and that's stupid." It's not stupid, I said quickly. It's just life. Things get in the way. It's hard. It is hard, he agreed, but it doesn't mean I don't miss you just as much. I think about you all the time. I catch myself reaching for my phone to tell you about something funny or something annoying that happened, and then I remember the time difference or that I'm still stuck in a meeting. And honestly, I hate it. I hate not having you here. His sincerity was a balm to my frayed nerves. The anxieties that had been swirling in my mind began to dissipate, replaced by a warm flood of relief and affection. "And Isabella?" I asked, a little sheepishly, deciding to put all my cards on the table. He blinked, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, then a slow, amused smile spread across his face. "Isabella? My colleague? She's lovely. Super smart. Great at her job. Why?" Then he seemed to put two and two together, and he burst out laughing, a full-bellied, genuine laugh that reached me across the miles. "You're worried about Isabella?" I felt my cheeks flush. "Well, you kept mentioning her, and I was feeling lonely and stupid." He shook his head, still chuckling, but then his expression turned tender. "Oh, my sweet, insecure man. There's nothing to worry about. Isabella is happily married with 2 kids, and even if she wasn't, she's not you. No one is you." He then launched into a detailed, slightly exaggerated anecdote about Isabella's fondness for extremely strong coffee and her endless supply of dry wit, which made me laugh and completely dispelled any lingering doubts. We talked for another hour, not just about the challenges, but about our hopes for when he returned, the things we'd do, the comfort of being back in each other's arms. That conversation was another turning point. It wasn't just about expressing my fears, but about Jose's reaction, his immediate empathy, his willingness to own his part in the communication lapse, and his unequivocal reassurance. It showed me a deeper layer of his character, his capacity for understanding, his commitment to addressing challenges head-on, even when tired and stressed. It also showed me that I could be vulnerable with him, that my insecurities wouldn't be met with judgment, but with love. The remaining 2 weeks of his trip, while still long, felt different. Our calls weren't necessarily longer, but they were more intentional. He made sure to carve out time, even if it was just 20 minutes of quiet conversation before he crashed, or a quick video call over his lunch break. He sent me silly photos of his hotel room, photos of the Toronto skyline, even a selfie with Isabella, who looked nothing like the femme fatale my anxious mind had conjured. The effort, the conscious decision to maintain our connection, was everything. I, in turn, found a renewed sense of purpose. I channeled my energy into making preparations for his return. I deep-cleaned the apartment, stocked his favorite snacks, even bought a ridiculous welcome home banner that I knew he'd roll his eyes at, then, secretly, love. I realized that my independence wasn't diminished by my love for him, it was enriched. My life wasn't empty without him, but it was undoubtedly fuller with him in it. The day he was due back, I felt a flutter of nerves that mimicked the excitement of our very first real date. I dressed carefully, even though I knew he wouldn't care what I wore. I went to the airport early, standing by the arrivals gate, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Then I saw him. He emerged from the stream of passengers, looking a little tired, a little rumpled from the flight, but his eyes lit up the moment he spotted me. A wide, genuine smile broke across his face. The same infectious grin I remembered from that first night, but now imbued with the weight of shared experiences, of challenges overcome, of a love that had deepened and matured. He dropped his carry-on bag and strode towards me, his arms already open. I rushed into his embrace, burying my face in his neck, inhaling the familiar scent of him. It was like coming home after a long journey I hadn't even realized I'd been on. "You're really here," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his hands cupping my face. "I'm here, and I missed you like crazy, mi amor." He kissed me, right there in the bustling airport, a kiss that tasted of distance and longing, and the sweet, undeniable joy of reunion. Back at the apartment, After we'd unloaded his bags and he'd taken a long, much-needed shower, we collapsed onto the sofa. He looked thoroughly exhausted, but his eyes were bright, content. "So," he said, pulling me close, his arms securely around me. "How was your month without me? Did you adopt any cats?" I laughed, leaning my head against his shoulder. "No cats, but I did learn a few things." "Oh yeah?" he prompted, nudging me gently. "Tell me." "That I really, really like having you around," I began, tracing patterns on his arm. "That I worry too much when you're not. And that our love isn't just about the easy moments, the laughter, and the shared silences. It's also about weathering the hard stuff, the distance, the insecurities, and that it comes out stronger on the other side." He squeezed me tighter. "Exactly. That's the real stuff, isn't it? The layers." "The unseen layers," I agreed, looking up at him. His eyes, though tired, held a depth I hadn't seen 2 months ago. The man who had stood naked and grinning in front of me during a power outage was still there, vibrant and free-spirited. But now I saw the intricate landscape beneath the surface, the history, the quiet struggles, the profound commitment. And falling in love with those layers felt even more meaningful than the initial electrifying spark. We talked for hours that night, just catching up on everything, the mundane and the meaningful. There was a newfound comfort, a deeper sense of trust and understanding that had blossomed in the space of his absence and the honesty of our conversation. It was a beautiful, humbling realization that love wasn't just about the grand gestures or the initial rush, but about the quiet, consistent work of showing up for each other, flaws and all, and trusting that the layers, once revealed, would only make the bond stronger. This was what real love felt like. Not always easy, but always worth it. The weight of the silence in my apartment had grown almost unbearable over the past week. It wasn't just the absence of Leo's easy laughter or the comfortable clatter he made in my kitchen. It was the deafening echo of my own unresolved fears. After our last conversation, the one where I'd clammed up, retreating into myself just as he was trying to pull me closer, a chasm had opened between us. He'd given me space, as he always did when he sensed my walls going up, but this time, the space felt less like a gift and more like a punishment I'd inflicted on myself. I sat on my worn leather armchair, a book open on my lap, unread. My eyes drifted to the window, watching the city lights flicker to life. Each tiny point of light felt like a distant possibility, while my own world felt shrouded in a perpetual, self-imposed twilight. Leo hadn't called. I hadn't called. We were both waiting, I supposed. But for what? For me to figure out what the hell I wanted? For him to give up? The thought sent a jolt of panic through me, sharp and undeniable. Give up on us. It wasn't fair to him. It never had been, not really. From the moment he'd stood there in my doorway, illuminated by the storm's distant flashes, naked and grinning, he'd been an unbridled force of life, a glorious, spontaneous disruption to my carefully curated existence. I was the one who overthought everything, who analyzed emotions until they lost their vibrancy, who built fortresses around my heart after a few too many heartbreaks. He, on the other hand, just felt. He loved openly, lived loudly, and offered his entire self without reservation. And that, terrifyingly, was precisely what made me want to run. My last serious relationship years ago had ended in a spectacular crash, leaving me convinced that vulnerability was a weakness, that true intimacy led only to pain. I'd spent so long rebuilding, brick by cautious brick, that the idea of letting someone, especially someone as profoundly significant as Leo, tear down those walls again, even gently, felt like an existential threat. But looking back now at the endless parade of quiet evenings alone, at the moments I caught myself smiling at an inside joke that only Leo would understand, at the palpable ache in my chest when I realized he wasn't there to share a simple observation about the weather, I knew the real threat wasn't vulnerability. It was the prospect of a life without him. I needed to fix this, not just for him, but for me. This wasn't some casual fling that could fizzle out with a polite distance. This was Leo. This was something real, something profound, something that had redefined my understanding of happiness. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over his contact name. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. What would I even say? Hey, sorry I've been emotionally constipated for the last week, but I think I've had an epiphany. No, it had to be more substantial than that. It had to be honest. It had to be everything. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I hit call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. My stomach plummeted with each unanswered ring. He's not going to pick up. He's done with me. Just as I was about to hang up, his voice, calm and warm, filled my ear. Jose? My name, from his lips, was a lifeline. Leo. Hey. My voice came out a little too breathy, a little too tentative. Hey yourself, he said, a note of careful neutrality in his tone. Everything okay? No, I admitted, the word a small, ragged breath. No, it's not really. I need to see you. Can we talk? A pause stretched between us, thick with unspoken questions and concerns. I imagined him on the other end, his brow probably furrowed, weighing my request. Tonight? He asked finally. Please, if you're free. I'm free, he confirmed, his voice softening imperceptibly. My place? Your place, I agreed, relief washing over me, making my limbs feel momentarily weak. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive to Leo's apartment felt endless. Each street lamp seemed to mock my hurried pace, the city lights blurring into a tunnel vision of anxiety and hope. What if he'd moved on? What if the silence had solidified into an impassable wall? These irrational fears gnawed at me, yet beneath them, a stubborn kernel of belief persisted. I knew Leo. He was patient. He was kind. He was also fiercely protective of his heart, and I'd seen the flicker of hurt in his eyes the last time we'd spoken. When I finally pulled up to his building, my hands were clammy on the steering wheel. I took another deep breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't just about talking. It was about laying bare parts of myself I'd kept hidden even from myself. This was about choosing to be brave. I walked up the familiar steps, the rhythmic thud of my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I paused at his door, my hand hovering over the bell. I could hear music faintly from inside, something soulful and a little melancholy. Perfect. I rang the bell. The music cut out. A moment later, the door opened. Leo stood there, framed in the soft glow of his living room lights. He was wearing an old, faded t-shirt and jeans, his dark hair a little rumpled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. His expression was guarded, a mix of curiosity and weary resignation. He looked tired, and my heart clenched at the thought that I might be the cause of it. Hey, I managed, my voice still a little shaky. Hey, he replied, stepping aside to let me in. He didn't smile, not really. It was a faint curve of his lips, a shadow of his usual beaming grin. The famous grin that had first captivated me in the dark. I stepped into his apartment, the scent of him, a mix of wood smoke, old books, and something uniquely Leo, instantly familiar and comforting, despite the tension. His apartment was always a reflection of him, lived in, warm, inviting, but also with a quiet strength in its simplicity. Come in, he said, gesturing towards the living room. He walked ahead, and I followed, my gaze fixed on the subtle stiffness in his shoulders. We sat on his couch, separated by a cushion's length, a polite, uncomfortable distance that felt like miles. So, he began, his voice low, what's on your mind, Jose? He kept his eyes fixed on a point just beyond my shoulder, avoiding my gaze. Everything, I said, forcing myself to meet his eyes. When he finally looked at me, I saw the raw emotion there, carefully veiled but present, hurt. hope, exhaustion, everything about us, everything about me. He nodded slowly, waiting. He wasn't going to make this easy for me, and I appreciated it. I needed to earn this. I've been I've been a mess this past week, I started, choosing my words carefully. After we talked, after after I shut down again, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about why I do that. Why every time things get really good, really deep, I pull back. I took a deep breath. And it's not because of you, Leo. It's never been because of you. It's because of me, my own baggage, my own fears. He still just listened, his expression unreadable, but his shoulders seemed to relax infinitesimally. I told you about my last relationship, I continued, feeling a painful knot tighten in my stomach. How it ended. How I got hurt. I built up all these walls, to protect myself, to make sure I never felt that kind of pain again. And for a long time, I thought those walls were working. I thought I was fine, content. I paused, searching for the right words, the words that could convey the profound shift he had brought into my life. Then you came along in a power outage, naked and grinning, I said, a faint smile finally touching my lips, and I saw a ghost of a smile in his eyes too. And everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, about what I wanted, it all got turned upside down. I leaned forward, closing the distance between us just a fraction. You showed me what it felt like to truly live again, Leo. To be open, to be vulnerable, to laugh without restraint, to feel joy that reaches all the way to my bones. And every time you did that, every time you asked for more of me, every time you looked at me with that incredible intensity and love, it terrified me. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. It terrified me because it felt too good to be true. It felt like I was tempting fate, like if I let myself be truly happy, truly loved, then it would all be ripped away again. And so, instead of leaning in, I pushed away. Instead of trusting, I doubted. Instead of embracing what we have, I let my past define my present. His gaze was fixed on me now, unwavering, and I could feel the empathy radiating from him. It gave me the courage to keep going. This past week, in the silence, I realized something. The pain of being alone, the fear of losing what we have because I couldn't open up. That's worse than any pain a broken heart could inflict. Because at least with a broken heart, you know you tried. You know you risked it all for something beautiful. But if I let my fear win, if I let you go because I was too afraid to truly love you, that would be the biggest regret of my life. I reached out, my hand hovering between us, then gently placed it on his knee. He didn't flinch. His skin was warm beneath my palm. I'm sorry, Leo. I'm so incredibly sorry for making you doubt, for making you feel anything less than cherished. You deserve someone who loves you completely, without reservation, without fear. And I want to be that person. I took a shaky breath, letting the words hang in the air, the raw truth of them vibrating between us. I want to be brave for you, for us. I want to face my fears, whatever they are, because what we have is worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. He finally broke his silence, his voice a low rumble. Jose, he began, and I braced myself for the rejection, for the admission that it was too late. But his hand came up, covering mine on his knee, his fingers lacing with mine. The simple touch sent a wave of electric warmth through me. I know you've been hurt, he said, his eyes searching mine. I've seen it, even when you tried to hide it. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to give you space. But there's a limit, Jose. Not because I stop loving you, but because I need to protect my own heart too. Watching you pull away, wondering if I was doing something wrong, if I was asking too much, if you even wanted this. That hurt. His words were gentle, but the truth of them was a sharp ache. He was right. I hadn't just hurt myself. I'd hurt him too. I know, I whispered, tears pricking at my eyes, and I'm so sorry. I don't want your apologies, he said, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. I want you, all of you, the messy parts, the scared parts, the parts you think aren't good enough, because I love all of it. I love you. His confession, so simple, so direct, broke something open inside me. The dam I'd built for years, the one that held back a torrent of emotion, finally burst. A single tear escaped, tracing a hot path down my cheek, then another, and another. He shifted closer, pulling me gently until I was against him, his arm wrapping around my back, holding me tight. My head rested against his shoulder, and I could hear the steady beat of his heart, a comforting rhythm that slowly, surely, calmed the storm within me. It's okay, he murmured, stroking my hair. It's okay to be scared, but you're not alone anymore. We're in this together, Jose. I clung to him, inhaling his scent, feeling the strength of his embrace. In that moment, surrounded by the familiar comfort of his apartment, enveloped in his unwavering love, the fear that had plagued me for so long began to recede. It didn't vanish entirely, but it diminished, shrinking in the face of something far greater. The vast, boundless love I felt for Leo, and the equally vast love he returned. We stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, the only sounds the soft hum of the refrigerator and our synchronized breathing. When my tears finally subsided, I pulled back just enough to look at him, my eyes still damp. I love you, I said, the words a heartfelt whisper, imbued with the weight of all the fears conquered, all the doubts dispelled. It was more than just a declaration. It was a promise. A genuine smile, his beautiful, radiant smile, finally broke across his face, lighting up his eyes. I love you too, Jose, more than words can say. He leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my lips. It was a kiss of forgiveness, of recommitment, of a future unfolding. Later that night, after a quiet, intimate dinner we cobbled together from his fridge, we sat curled on the couch again, talking, truly talking, for hours. I opened up about my past fears in a way I never had before, delving into the specifics of my previous heartbreak, the betrayal, the lingering sense of inadequacy it had left behind. Leo listened patiently, his hand gently stroking my arm, offering quiet affirmations and understanding. He didn't try to fix it or diminish my pain, he simply held space for it, for me. And then he shared his own vulnerabilities, things I hadn't fully grasped before. He admitted that my silences, my withdrawals, had made him question himself, made him wonder if he was rushing things, if he was too much for me. He spoke of his own anxieties about commitment, born from watching his parents' tumultuous marriage, and how my steadfastness, despite my fears, was what kept him grounded. It wasn't all easy for him either, I realized. His outward confidence masked a deeper sensitivity, a carefulness I had underestimated. I guess we both have our ghosts, huh? He said, a wry smile playing on his lips. Ghosts that need to learn to share the apartment, I joked, feeling lighter than I had in years. Or get evicted, he countered, a playful glint in his eyes. This apartment is getting a little crowded with all our emotional baggage. The conversation flowed seamlessly, from past pains to future dreams. We talked about travel, about our careers, about the ridiculous prospect of ever owning a dog despite our busy schedules. It felt like laying the foundation for something enduring, something real. You know, he said, pulling me closer, his chin resting on my head. I was terrified that night when the power went out. My phone was dead. It was pitch black, and I was all alone. I chuckled softly. You didn't seem terrified when you opened the door. Because I saw you, he confessed, his voice a warm murmur against my hair. Suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore, and something about you, standing there in the storm, looking so bewildered, so solid, just made me want to make you laugh, to break the tension. And maybe, he added, his voice dropping, to see if you'd be startled enough to show me something real. I smiled, remembering the sheer absurdity and beauty of that moment. And then you took off your clothes. He laughed, a deep, joyful sound that resonated through my chest. Well, you looked like you needed a good shock. And it worked, didn't it? It worked, all right, I agreed, a shiver of warmth running through me as I remembered the raw visceral impact of his unexpected honesty, his complete lack of inhibition. It was audacious, ridiculous, and utterly him. It was the moment my carefully constructed world started to tilt on its axis. I never thought that night, that bizarre, crazy beginning, would lead to this, I admitted, looking around his living room at the life we were building together, brick by emotional brick. To us, me neither, he said, squeezing me. But I'm so glad it did, every single moment, even the scary parts. The next morning, waking up tangled in his sheets, sunlight streaming through his bedroom window, felt different. It wasn't just the comfort of his body next to mine, the familiar scent of his skin. It was a sense of lightness, of having shed a heavy burden. The world outside seemed brighter, clearer, imbued with a new promise. We made breakfast together, slow and easy. The silence between us no longer tense, but companionable, filled with unspoken understanding. Over coffee, Leo brought up something that had been hanging in the air. My lease is up in a few months, he said, stirring his mug. He glanced at me, his eyes full of a question he didn't voice. My heart gave a little leap. This was it. The next step. The bigger commitment. The one that, just a week ago, would have sent me spiraling. But now, after our raw, honest conversation, after peeling back the layers of my own fear, it felt right. Mine too, actually, I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. I'd been thinking about renewing, but... He waited, watching me, his gaze gentle but expectant. But maybe we don't need 2 separate apartments anymore, I finished, feeling a giddy rush of excitement and a surprising lack of panic. The fear was there, a tiny tremor, but it was overshadowed by a wave of anticipation. His smile widened, illuminating his entire face. Are you saying what I think you're saying, Jose? I'm saying, I said, reaching across the table to take his hand, that I want to build a home with you, Leo. A real one. One where we face the scary parts together. One where there's never silence when we need to talk. One where we can just be ourselves, completely and utterly. He squeezed my hand, his eyes shining. I want that too, Jose, more than anything. We spent the rest of the day talking about logistics, about finding a new place, about merging our lives. It was practical and exhilarating all at once. We walked through neighborhoods, pointing out buildings, making plans that felt substantial and real. We were stepping into a future that felt unwritten, full of possibilities, but also grounded in a shared foundation of honesty and love. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, we found ourselves back at my apartment. We were packing up some of his things that had accumulated here, laughing at the sheer volume of stuff that seemed to have materialized over the months. I picked up an old, battered photo frame from my bookshelf. It was a picture of me and my ex, taken years ago, from a time when I still believed in a certain kind of fairy tale love. I hadn't looked at it properly in ages, hadn't had the courage to truly process what it represented. Leo came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. He looked at the photo, his expression unreadable. That's ancient history, I said, a faint blush creeping up my neck. It's part of your history, he corrected gently. Part of what made you, you. I turned in his embrace, looking up at him. But it's not us. No, he agreed, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. It's not. Our story starts differently, in the dark, with a lightning strike, and a lot less clothing. He grinned, and it was the same mischievous, utterly endearing grin that had first disarmed me, the one that still made my heart skip. I pulled the photo out of the frame, tearing it carefully in half, then into smaller pieces. I didn't feel regret or anger, just a quiet sense of closure. It was a symbol, an act of letting go. "What are you doing?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Making space," I told him, looking into his eyes. "Space for our story, for our future." He kissed me then, a deep, passionate kiss that spoke of everything we'd been through and everything we were about to become. It was a kiss that sealed a promise, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most profound journeys. As the last vestiges of daylight faded, plunging my apartment into a gentle twilight, I felt a profound sense of peace. The storm, both literal and metaphorical, had passed, and in its wake something resilient, something truly magnificent, had blossomed. We stood there, silhouetted against the window, the city lights twinkling outside like a million hopeful stars. Our future wasn't scripted, I knew that. It would be messy and complicated and beautiful, just like life itself. There would be challenges, no doubt, and moments of doubt, because that was human nature. But now I knew I wouldn't face them alone. I had Leo, with his unwavering love, his infectious grin, his incredible capacity for joy and empathy. And he had me, finally open, finally brave, ready to fully embrace the vibrant, unscripted adventure of our life together. The darkness of that initial power outage had yielded a light I never knew existed, a light that now shone brighter than any fear.